Great, it's 1 minute past 5 o'clock London time, so I'm going to open this webinar formally and say hello to everybody who's here and welcome. Thank you for coming to this webinar, focusing on a new tool to help build transparency about global weapons. My name is Henrietta Wilson. I'm a freelance researcher specialising in weapons of mass destruction disarmament, mostly working with SOAS, University of London at the moment, and other UK universities. I'm joined by an absolutely fantastic panel. I'm so excited by all these people that are here. Before I hand over to them, I'm going to say a few words about why we're here. So we organised this webinar to preview a website that's been built by two teams of students from Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Massachusetts. Why I've got my tongue twisted is I'm trying to share my screen while I talk. So this is a site of the website. Can you all see that? Can I get a thumbs up? Thank you. So I'll just talk you through some of the key aspects of it. This is the homepage. The point of the website is to act as a portal to different open source research around the world that's used to look at weapons, holdings, exports, illicit proliferation, and also to look at how weapons are used around the world. So the homepage has different categories. You can see here, if you click on the different categories, we have tracking weapons here. It takes you to links to organisations that are using publicly available tools or information to bring some transparency to weapons. If you hover over the different organisations, it gives you a short description of what they do. If you click on the organisations, it takes you to a bit more information and a link to the organisation page. So this is very much a portal, a kind of hub where you can go to find out who in the world is monitoring weapons. If you go to the bottom of the pages, there's this really nifty little navigation tool that can take you back to any of the categories or back to the home page, which I'll do now. And then at the bottom of the home page, there are some really exciting visualizations that's been derived from data from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute and the UN Register of Conventional Arms. And what the students did was they processed the information from those two sources and displayed it on different maps and had this amazing slider tool which shows how the numbers change over time. So that's just to give you a little preview. I will also drop the link into the chat box so you can look at more detail yourself over the course of the webinar. I'm just going to kind of flag up a couple of things about it. I've already said it was built by two different teams of undergraduate students, and we're hoping to continue the work with future sets of students. And I want to just say a bit about why I'm here saying this work, because the team at SOAS and OXFAM were really lucky to be given an opportunity to work with Worcester Polytechnic Institute on this and act as external sponsors or guides to the world of weapons and the world of weapons tracking. So we're really excited to do this because it links directly into some research we're doing on open source research techniques and the difference that non-governmental groups are now playing in global efforts to understand and regulate weapons. So things that used to be only possible to international organisations or individual states intelligence agencies, now individuals can do it, looking on the internet. And so we were very excited by this project to build a portal to different groups doing this. So I'm going to say a little bit, a few words about housekeeping. The webinar is being recorded. We have the intention of publishing it on the Scrap Weapons website at some stage. Please do, throughout the session, add comments or questions via the chat function. I'll be keeping an eye on that, and I'll feed your questions to panelists at appropriate times. And now it's time to introduce the panel. We have John Michael Davis, if you'd like to give a wave, John Michael, who was the academic advisor to the second student team and is an assistant teaching professor at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. And he's going to be followed by Dan Plesch, who's director of the Scrap Weapons Project, hi Dan, and professor of international relations at SOAS. He's going to be followed by Martin Butcher, who's the acting head of the OXFAM office to the UN in New York. And he'll be followed by Alexandra Quimova, who is from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, where she's a researcher on the arms transfer programme. And finally, we've got Melissa Hanham, who's an open source research specialist and international security expert, and he's one of the few women named in the We Are Bellingcat book. So great panel. I've said enough now. Over to you, John Michael. Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for being here, and thanks to Henrietta, who invited me to share a little bit about WPI and our global projects program and the really impressive work done by a team of students that I was advising. So to give you some background on WPI and our global projects program, WPI is a small to medium-sized STEM school in Worcester, Massachusetts, and there's a degree requirement for all students in their third year to complete what we call an interactive qualifying project, or an IQP. And this gives every WPI student the experience of working in interdisciplinary teams to solve a problem or need that lies at the intersection of science, technology, and society. So in normal non-pandemic years, about 80% of our students would complete their IQPs in one of the 50 or so project centers that WPI has established throughout the world. And one of our project centers is in London, which is directed by Professor Dominic Golding, who develops projects with London-based organizations. So the blueprint for the IQP is that student teams are paired with a local sponsor organization that identifies a problem that a team of 4 to 5 students can research and provide insight and sometimes a viable solution for. Student teams are given a project description, and about 2 months before they arrive on site, they complete a course where they learn the fundamentals of social science research, and they develop a detailed research proposal that guides their research project. And then during the following 2-month term, they complete their IQPs on site as a full-time course load. However, with the pandemic, nearly all of our IQPs have been completed remotely, although fortunately for a lot of our project centers, we're still able to work with local sponsor organizations. And for our London projects, we were delighted to have SOAS serve as one of our sponsors, so our students still have kind of a bit of London exposure, even though they're staying with us in Worcester. So one of the teams that I prepared for our London IQP and advised was a 5-team member team, a really impressive group. It consisted of Jack Avasian, Kimberly Codreau, Benjamin Cundon, Victor Mercola, and Donovan Thames, whose fields of study were predominantly computer science and electrical engineering, if I recall correctly. And they had a project sponsored by SOAS University of London with direction coming from Dan Plesch, Henrietta Wilson, and Martin Butcher. And the team was picking up a project that a previous IQP team had worked on with Dan and Henrietta, with the goal of creating this global weapons tracking website into this one-stop shop platform that informs the public on large arms control, kind of brings together the arms control community, and hopefully serves as a tool that can help keep nations accountable and transparent regarding their stockpiles and large arms trades. So in preparation for the project, before the team started their IQP, they conducted their background research. This was a new field for them, so they were learning about the state of global disarmaments, familiarizing themselves with rationales and challenges of disarmament efforts, who the key players are, major international treaties, and kind of the work that lies ahead. And their project goal, which kind of evolved over lots of discussions with their sponsors, was broken down into 3 objectives. The first was to solicit feedback from disarmament organizations that were identified by the previous team and their sponsor to improve the website design and really think through what the value of the website might bring to the arms control community. So the team did this by kind of building on the previous website prototype, and they sent out an electronic survey to 30 disarmament organizations. And I think they received a response from 14 or 15 organizations who reviewed the website, provided comments on the navigability, design, the content of the website. And based on these comments, the team was able to revise the website. Their second objective was to develop an interactive map that displays global stockpiles and trades of large weapons. So the team drew from open source intelligence databases using a Python programming language to create databases, and they developed a series of interactive maps to promote global disarmament efforts. The team used publicly available data from SIPRI's arms transfer database and UN ROCA to generate the maps. So they consolidated data from SIPRI's large arms imports and exports into a time-lapse map, as Henrietta kind of previewed there, showing the total number of weapons by category each country had imported and exported over time. And they combined this with data from UN ROCA on nation stockpiles, all of which is now viewable on the Global Weapons Tracking website. Finally, the third objective was to show objective indicators representing the weapons transparency of countries. So the team extracted data from UN ROCA to create a map that shows each country's total number of submitted UN ROCA reports based on their imports, exports, military holdings, national production, and small arms and light weapons, which serve as an indicator of transparency. The team was also able to draw some inferences on the data to hypothesize some reasons why countries may or may not be reporting their data. So the result of the study is the finalized website that's brought us together today. And while it's unfortunate the team was unable to present, I think a few of them are in attendance here. They're the real brains behind the research project and would be able to best respond to questions that come up. But I'm more than happy to stand in and share the key components, the main findings of their work. And I'm delighted to see how it's kind of come to fruition at this soft launch here. So thanks again for bringing us all together, Henrietta.
It's an absolute pleasure, and I absolutely echo that. The students are amazing. You know, the energy and the intellect that they brought to this was really deeply impressive. And we were very pleased by it. You picked out a load of really good points that I didn't mention in my introduction, and I could have done. And I particularly want to flag up the effort that went into getting permissions from everybody to be part of the website. You know, I'm sure we've all had experiences of emailing people and they don't get back to you. And there was it took a whole bunch of efforts to make sure that people were happy to be named, which of course is very, very important. Yeah. Thank you very much, John Michael. Over to you, Dan. Tell us about what the website means to your work and your ideas for transparency in the world.
Well, I think we described it to each other as a Christmas present, more than we could have expected when we first got this offer from Worcester Polytechnic for collaboration, because I think for a year or two, Henrietta and I had been looking at the question of, well, what does verification look like in the age of Google and Google Earth? We conducted interviews about the future of verification with a number of the Iraq inspectors, Hans Blix and others. And part of their response was, why are you asking us about all this old stuff? This all is technologically so much easier now in the digital world. And we were conducting some webinars, exploring these issues when this offer came in. And I think what we discussed with the teams and what has been realized performs hopefully two functions, or three. One is, I think we found that many of the people working in different aspects of this area didn't really know each other. And the webinars and this exercise have helped bring them together. But also that if you are interested, even if you're quite an expert researcher, or just an interested member of the public or a journalist, and something kicks off and you want to find out and research what's going on with respect to weapons, verification of human rights abuses, hopefully what we provided is a portal into that world. We'll continue to add and refine it, but it's a place to go. I wouldn't say one-stop shopping, but it's a place that people hopefully will be able to use in getting a grip on current events. But more broadly, hopefully from that, people will then start to see from this practical illustration that global weapons tracking is not an impossible dream, and that civil society has a practical role to play in alongside and augmenting the official world. And it's been fantastic the way the students have developed this. Perhaps no coincidence, they are constituents of Ed Markey, but also great the way in which we were able to get a very fruitful cooperation with Martin Butcher, with OXFAM, with SIPRI in developing these ideas. As I say, we hope that people will increasingly be able to share this and use this and supplement this as a portal into tracking what's going on with weapons that they're concerned about, and more broadly, in some instances, human rights abuses. And that from that extrapolate to the idea that in the age of Google Earth, tracking the world's weapons is actually a much easier technological task than, say, tracking the world's carbon emissions, which the world has signed up to. That's all from me.
Thank you, Dan. A great vision about the possibilities of transparency, and some of the, it relates back to some of the really early dreams from the 1950s arms control disarmament community about citizens verification or societal monitoring. Thank you. So over to you now, Martin. Tell us about your take on the website and the work and the role of transparency.
Thanks, Henrietta. So OXFAM has been engaged in arms control work for about the last 20 to 25 years, and I joined OXFAM a bit over a decade ago to work on the negotiation of the Arms Trade Treaty. And the reason for this largely is that OXFAM as a humanitarian agency is daily responding to conflict situations where the use of arms creates crises that put people at need of, food aid, shelter, water, whatever. So that's something which is our core work, but OXFAM is a little unusual amongst humanitarian agencies in that right from the very beginning, during World War II, advocacy for change has been part of our mandate. So we don't just look at a situation like the war in Yemen and see how we can help provide water and sanitary facilities for people who are affected by fighting. We're actively tracking the weapons that are being used there and trying to stop them getting there. So we're involved, for example, in the court case brought by the Campaign Against Arms Trade to try to stop UK arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Obviously, in that kind of advocacy work, you need good information. And that applies in a wide range of contexts. And so a website like this is a tremendously useful tool for us. So the data from Stockholm International Peace Research Institute is something that I use regularly in my work. And the kind of visualization that the WPI students have been able to produce just makes things so user-friendly. It's absolutely great. I think it's the sort of work which my non-specialist colleagues, non-arms specialist colleagues in OXFAM, in country teams in places like Ethiopia and Mali and Syria, the places where we're working at the moment, will be able to use to help build advocacy policies that Oxfam puts forward at the UN, where I'm working at the moment, in many different countries. So I think this kind of transparency is absolutely vital. Without it, we couldn't do the job. And one of the reasons that we got into the Arms Trade Treaty was that there were, in secret, both irresponsible arms deals going on, and the illicit arms trade just affects people so badly. So transparency is absolutely vital. It's key to our work. It's key to the protection of civilians in conflict. And for OXFAM, that's a key goal.
Thank you very much, Martin. That was a really brilliant insight into applied policy research, that it's not just transparency for its own sake as a sort of nice little, it's nice to be informed. It's actually making a difference to people that are suffering from weapons around the world. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
I'm going to hand over to Alexandra Quimova now, who's from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute that Martin's been mentioning, an absolute heavyweight in providing information for the whole arms control disarmament research community. Thank you, Alexandra.
Thank you very much, Henrietta, and everyone. So first of all, I would like to say again, thank you for the opportunity to attend this webinar. And it is a great pleasure and honor for me to be among these brilliant panelists and discuss these very important issues of transparency. I would like to start my presentation with a short overview of our work at SIPRI. And I would like to say a couple of words about the challenges that we face every single day, and about our way of working and how the Global Weapons Tracking website can contribute and help us to work. So one of the objectives of our work at SIPRI is to generate contribution to knowledge about arms transfers by conducting research on related topics. The research has a strong emphasis on collecting data and on analyzing data for the arms transfer database. We also try to disseminate research analysis, of course, and provide some policy recommendations to the variety of parties. And by conducting this research on arms transfers, we aim and hope to increase the understanding of the impact of arms transfers on peace and security. And one of the most important aims of the SIPRI research is to contribute to greater transparency, which we have common goal with the event today. So we believe, of course, that transparency serves as a major tool of ensuring responsible international arms transfers, and thereby helping to prevent violent conflict and warn about potentially destabilizing arms accumulations. And transparency in military matters doesn't matter whether it's arms transfers or military spending or weapon tracking, is an essential element for enacting confidence and security building measures. You probably are thinking, but what sources we use to collect information for our database, and I will answer this question. So we use the variety of sources when collecting information and tracking weapons. We work with open source information only, meaning that this information is published and available to the general public. The sources include official government publications, defense budget documents, national reports, and also we use information from the reporting mechanisms such as UNROCA, ATT, and some national mechanisms. And with regard to some limitations, in some cases it is hard for us to see. We also try to use the OSINT tools, OSINT intelligence techniques tools in our work, and sometimes it's hard for us to see what tools are there and what is happening, how we can use it, what organizations are there that can help us to track and analyze weapon systems. So in this regard, it is important to have an instrument which brings together all these tools, reporting mechanisms in an organized and structured way. And in my view, the website that we are discussing today, the portal, is an excellent tool for this purpose. And what is missing, in my view, at the moment is communication or even information exchange between different stakeholders, such as research organizations, journalists, field researchers, and the website on global weapon tracking can serve as an excellent platform for bringing together different tools, mechanisms, instruments contributing to the broader understanding of the impact of arms transfers. And of course, the website can also contribute to raising awareness and promote, in a way, dialogue between different parties. Therefore, I would like to say thank you again for launching this portal and for inviting me to discuss this interesting and excellent tool. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. You answered the question I was going to write. I had said something about, I wonder where SIPRI gets its sources from, and you answered the question brilliantly. That was a really helpful set of comments about the website and about how websites like this can be useful to the wider community. I'm now going to hand over to Melissa Hanham, who herself has worked as an open source intelligence or OSINT person, and I invited to reflect on the website and its usefulness more broadly. Yeah, thank you, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me, Henrietta. And as a person who has worked on both the quantitative side and the policy side, I really have to congratulate all the people involved. I think this type of exercise is valuable not only for the product that was delivered, but also for the experience of working across specialties and skills. Unfortunately, in our field, there are far too many people who identify as only policy people or only data people. And we in order to evolve our field and stay on top of the subject matter, we need to have more and more of these sort of Renaissance people who are willing to cross over. So I can imagine the students receiving the data and wanting just really clean CSV files that make perfect sense, that don't need any decoding or explanation. And I also recognize the hard work of the analysts who gather this data and know that there's an asterisk next to each number that's there because of, this data was unavailable, or this report was not turned in, or there was a quantitative margin of error provided because of this or that. And I because of projects I've worked on myself, I recognize how difficult it is. And so I wanted to congratulate all the participants on working on what is a very, very difficult project to work on. I also hope that the relationships that were forged during this project will continue. Our field desperately needs people who with new emerging skills in open source and quantitative measures to continue in this field and not feel frustrated and give up, because our field is aging, and even though our field is no less important, no less scary or necessary to work on, there are fewer people who are willing to take up the work and look at these issues. So we need smart engineers, designers, data scientists to join in these very, very important subjects. So I hope that as undergraduates become possibly graduate students or go and work, that they will consider joining the field. I did have an opportunity to go through the website, and I wanted to congratulate you on making a very clean, simple. I couldn't get it to crash necessarily or anything like that. I was a little bit mean to it, but and it looks like a really strong design. I do very much like that I can manipulate the data. I really like that I can download PNG files. So for example, if I was a journalist or I was writing a scholarly article, I could export that image I wanted, and even as a PNG file, edit it myself to include information. I thought the sourcing was good. I would, if I were a recipient of a lot more money to continue this project, I would encourage you to have the policy people now come in and do some heavy duty writing on what the data showed, and perhaps even show some use cases. how this data identified something unusual or important. I'd also love for this website to get the recognition that it deserves by allowing people to embed the live maps into perhaps SIPRI's website, for example, so that it can still redirect you back to the global tracking site with Scrap, but it also allows you to navigate it from SIPRI's high traffic website and really visualize the data that SIPRI has worked and hard and long for decades on in a very visual way. I think in addition, if I were to propose a follow-on project, I would also maybe ask for opportunities where people could nominate their own data sets to join or resources to join. This is a really simple fix. Since it's WordPress, you could just put in an email bucket where you click and then perhaps send a message to say, hey, I know about this data set, or I want to report that there's a mistake or a bug or something like that. But bravo to what I know is a very difficult engineering problem, a very difficult data science problem, and also congratulations to the team that had the foresight to see the necessity for it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Melissa. Well, that's a very interesting set of comments you gave. You've clearly subjected it to far more rigorous testing than I did. I just clicked through the buttons, and yeah, and it's good to know that it held up to that level of scrutiny. Thank you too for a really helpful set of next steps, and I've scribbled them all down. John, Michael, Dan, and Martin, have you also been listening to those? For hopefully we'll have another team of students. So a wonderful set of talks. Thank you very much. We now have up to half an hour for discussions, and we've had a question via the chat function. Please, everybody that's attending, do feel free to add any comments or chats as well. The question was from Dominic Golding at WPI. Hello, Dominic. It's great to see you. He's asked about the what feedback we've had from about the site. And so I think this is a question for me, because I've when the second team stopped working, I took over in trying to get permissions from people that hadn't yet responded to them, and overwhelmingly positive feedback from the people that replied. Some people needed a few nudges, but they said things very similar to the words we've heard here. That it's clean, it looks nice, it's very instinctive to use, and generally a sense of excitement that it's here and that people are being given a chance to be on it. They like being part of this and they get the overall vision. So I hope that answers your question, Dominic. And I think with future teams of students, we'll also be rolling out further feedback, getting feedback from other organisations as well. Dan, I did wonder if you might want to say something about the informal conversations we've had with some of the Scrap partners about it.
What did you have in mind?
The former Scrap student that now works in the financial sector.
Oh, yes. Well, one of our Scrap volunteers of 10 years ago now is now head of strategy and risk analysis at Lloyd's of London, which is we're quite pleased with that career projection, shall we say. And he's, I think, provided an early insight into the first phase of this project. And I think we want to talk to him more about how we can use it in that field. We also have a track record of working and need a website established jointly with GCSP in Geneva and the Interparliamentary Union, but also based in Geneva. I did a number of projects with them on disarmament, and we think that this is something which will be very useful for them to project through to their parliament members in parliaments all around the world. So I think there's two potential user groups. There's also some of my American friends may know Marilla Kelly, who does a lot of work on developing resources for hard-pressed congressional staff. And we want to go back to her because I think she thought it was also useful to legislative assistants. So those are potential user groups, but I think we need to work with the participants in this discussion and others to, hopefully exponentially create awareness. And if there are members here or people in the audience who want to blog or write about that, don't wait for us. To be frank, we have our work cut out like we all do. So if you think it's good, please tell people.
Great, thank you, Dan. I was thinking maybe we could open out the conversation a little bit now. Several people, in particular Martin and Alexandra, mentioned the benefits of transparency, and I get it. Obviously, that like better information is better for all sorts of reasons. It leads to good decision making, robust decision making, and also is possibly a way to leverage public opinion by shaming wrongdoing. I'm interested though in this latest incarnation of open source research that's very dependent on digital tools. It can be very quick, and so the transparency could be super speedy. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about if that's destabilizing in any way, or if that kind of changes the picture, the roles that transparency could or should be playing. So I'm going to ask, first of all, Martin, and then Alexandra, and then Melissa to comment on that question, if that's okay.
I think it's an interesting question, Henrietta. It's certainly true that there are plenty of military leaders in countries where they are not used to the kinds of levels of transparency that we saw in Europe in the post-Cold War period, who think that transparency is destabilizing and are horrified by the idea that it would become routine knowledge, what their arms holdings are, where soldiers are deployed, that kind of thing. But in the world we now live in, where mobile phones are ubiquitous, and information can be transferred, as you say, instantaneously, there's no way around that. And on the whole, I disagree anyway. I think it's really interesting that from an OXFAM perspective, the conflicts where there has been more transparency, and in particularly citizen transparency, using the kinds of tools that are compiled into this website, and going back to the very origins of Bellingcat, back in the days of the Brown Moses blog, and being able to identify people misusing weapons and committing atrocities, almost as they're doing it, and has been at the very least a useful tool towards future prosecutions. And if institutions like the International Criminal Court are going to grow and become more useful and have a greater restraining effect on people that would commit war crimes, that's the kind of thing that we need to build on and exploit more. So I from the NGO perspective, do not see a downside here.
Great, very reassuring, thank you. Alexandra, do you have any thoughts about the speed of these tools making a difference to transparency patterns? I guess part of what was in my head when I asked the question was, it takes enormous amounts of time to authenticate, to collect and authenticate data, and the speed with which there's sort of a pressure on OSINT work to be done quite quickly, because the digital tools kind of suggest that that is possible. So I guess that's part of my reflections about the changing landscape. Yeah, thank you, Alexandra.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to say a couple of words about again, to highlight the role of transparency, and then I will talk about the use of open sources. So transparency, per definition, is an essential element for enacting, as we also discussed already, confidence and security building measures, and to build mutual trust between states, avoid suspicion and speculation with regard to military buildups. This is proven by many research works and by many research articles and by some practical experience. However, many states still think that they do not want to provide information. I will speak about my perspective, information about arms transfers, for example, because of the certain security reasons. However, even though they say that they do not want to share this information, information is already out there, because there are so many media, as you said, that the use of internet is growing, and there are so many media outlets who actually track weapons, and there are so many activists who take pictures of weapons on the streets and put it online. We have Twitter, we have Facebook. So this information is already there. What states should understand in this regard is that they should prevent misinformation and disinformation, because lack of transparency on reporting on arms transfers can actually damage their reputation, because information about weapon systems published online, for example, can be used in a very, very wrong way. But if the states publish this information, then analysts and researchers can make their own conclusions with regard to the use of these weapons, or at least how these weapons were transferred to this or that states, or even to conflict areas. And I also want to say a couple of words about OSINT tools. Yes, I do think it is important to use different open source intelligence techniques. However, we still, as researchers, we should be very careful by using this, because what is important is to verify data in a very organized and structured way. So that's why I know that many organizations like Bellingcat or Lighthouse Report, they use open source intelligence tools, and I really appreciate their work because they have several levels of verification. So what I want to say for researchers that do use open source intelligence techniques, that they do need to know these levels of verification. We do need to understand that some pictures or videos can be recycled, for example. So we do need to know that the pictures and videos are original. We need to know who put these pictures or videos, why, and again, to highlight that there are several levels of verifying information. So it's not enough to use only single open source intelligence tool. You need to use it in a combination, and you need still to talk with experts to confirm your thoughts or your analysis. I can talk about it forever, to be honest, but I will let other speakers, of course, talk as well.
Alexandra, it's really fascinating to hear you saying that. So I think what I heard was from both you and Martin, transparency is good. You know, there's no downside to it, but the challenge is to make sure it's the right sort of transparency, that things are not being made transparent that are actually wrong, that they're misinformation or disinformation, and that if you're using the online open source techniques, that needs to be sifted. So I'm going to hand over to Melissa now, who's the person in the room that's done the open source research, to hear your views on the technologies, but also on the transparency issue. Thank you, Melissa.
Well, I was quite moved by what both Martin and Alexandra said, and you know, I think Martin has often talked about the use of weapons in violence, and you know, it's easy for states to say, well, that was a mistake, that was an error, their weapon was recycled or stolen or bought or traded in some way that was beyond our control. And I also thought it was interesting to think about when we write a treaty, how can we make this treaty verifiable from the start? And taking a little bit from what Alexandra said is that states really should make this easier for themselves, accountable for themselves. If their intent is not to have such accidents happen, then they should create verification points throughout the timeline of the treaty itself. And I think that states can help themselves if their intent is truly to prevent weapons that are used for non-state actor activity, for example, that arms sales should have these verification points built into them. State conflict itself is also very complex, and I could see how states may want to push back and have less transparency on that. But one of the things that Alexandra mentioned is having this clean data ahead of time, because it is much easier for third-party open source researchers to verify whether something is true or not. A positive statement is much more difficult to find undeclared activity or transfers. It's much harder to search for something that may or may not exist than to disprove or prove a fact that is asserted positively by a government. So I can see how some states may feel reticent about some of these, but I would definitely use this as a point to advocate for states who truly wish to make this difference, to build in the verification from the start, so that that they can essentially assert that they've behaved in a way that is in accordance to the intent of the treaty.
Great. I'm now feeling like Alexandra that I could spend a lot longer talking to all of you about this and kind of take it back to Martin's advocacy in the UN right now about how likely all of that is. But we're approaching the final 10 minutes, and I do want to come back to Melissa's point about community and recruitment of new people into the field, and making sure we're not all siloed in different areas, and umbrella websites like the one that's been built can be very useful in building collaborations in different ways. And I wondered if John Michael might be able to reflect on your program of how you brought in young people into social responsibility projects, and if there's any sense of what happens next with them. If you think, you know, I don't know, it's putting you on the spot a bit maybe, but if there's any information from WPI about if they think that the students that have been engaged in this sort of work then go on to be socially responsible in their future STEM lives. And then I'll come back to Dan with a similar sort of question, because he works with a lot of student volunteers at Scrap.
That's a good question. It's a hard one to think of a strong affirmative answer for as well. Oftentimes I find the IQP projects that students do the best work are the ones that they're most passionate about, and they get really motivated. And this project seemed, it was very self-evident to the students how important the work is, that they're you know, grabbing onto a small element of disarmament efforts and kind of pushing the ball forward in a very modest way. But you can kind of feel the importance of the work they're doing as they kind of learn more about it. And that can certainly lead to wanting to have careers in those fields, or staying interested in that field. So I think having maybe more opportunities, and I know the director for the London site, Dominic Golden, is interested in continuing working in this area, developing more projects for students. But that could be a possible opportunity beyond WPI, having student projects in different areas of disarmament, whether through civil society or universities, to give students the opportunity to learn more about this field and possibly spark interest in pursuing it further.
Thank you, John Michael. Great answer. And I have to say, from the outside, you know, and I did my first degree was in physics, and it was a very straight ahead physics course. I enjoyed it, but it was really exciting to me to hear about a science, technology, engineering, and maths college that insists that their students think about society issues more broadly. A really exciting educational tool, and yes, the people, the students that we worked with were really engaged, you know, and I'm aware, you know, people in this field, it is very nerdy and it's very acrony and it's quite hard to explain the kind of nitty-bitty details of things, and they got it very quickly. They understood the problem, they were out looking for data sources on their own, and really understood it brilliantly. Yeah. So it was very exciting. Dan, what's your experience of recruiting young people into the disarmament field?
Well, quite good. I think a long time ago, I'd written a book which had a chapter on what became the Scrap Project, but managed to arrange for some of my students to go to Global Zero in Washington. And they came back saying, well, this is fantastic, but these Washington people won't talk about regional security and confidence building measures. They will only talk about nuclear weapons. And it's obvious you have to talk about regional security and conventional weapons. So why aren't you doing something about your book chapter? And I said, well, I have a department to run. So perhaps you can help. And then with successive generations of 1-year master's students in the British format, we built the whole Scrap Project. Through many iterations, and quite a number of those people are now working for or indeed running NGOs in London and elsewhere. So yes, in some sense it is an aging field, but I think it's also a question of what universities do to and other places do to offer a cliched word, but activities that really have meaning to students. And then when they are offered that, I think they very often will grab it.
Yeah.
All too often, to be blunt, they're used as astroturf by international organizations and people to sit behind desks and hand out badges. And that's a huge waste of systems which are extremely hierarchical. Both international organizations, NGOs, sadly, but universities as well. Whereas, you know, historically in other fields, people in their late teenagers and early 20s can and should and ought to be out there leading from the front and not in a queue to wait 20 years before they're allowed to do anything meaningful, which is how large parts of our society are constructed.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, you know, there's increasingly calls in lots of different sectors for more youth voices. But it's not often that youth voices are given a chance to engage with a real bit of policy research or activism, in my opinion. And I know, Melissa, you've been involved in an initiative that's also trying to capture different voices as well. I'm thinking of organisations in solidarity and the women of colour advancing peace and security. And again, from my perspective, that's doing extraordinary work, trying to build communities, support people to get involved in actual live events more than has been possible in the past. I don't know if you could say a few words about that, and if that kind of captures this sort of umbrella, non-siloed energy that you mentioned in your talk.
Yeah, I mean, I think that diversity, equity, and inclusion is important in this discussion. And I think it's good not just because we get a better intelligence product, we get better data, but because the activity itself causes people from different fields, different backgrounds to have a spark of insight and connect to the issue itself and realize how it affects them and matters. So anytime we have a cross-cultural or cross-departmental activity, I often feel that it's not just that we get a better product at the end of it, but the act itself is valuable because it can affect all the parties involved in ways that maybe you didn't know or didn't intend, but are still very, very positive. So just as I said earlier, I was really hoping for more people from data science, engineering, and design to come into our field. I very much want to have BIPOC voices, voices from other countries which are underrepresented in these conversations, and voices from maybe underrepresented populations in their own country also to have their voices heard. To any extent we can offer educational tools, research, mentorship, sponsorship, and access to data, the more we give those kinds of people agency to have a stake in the fight and be able to fight it well.
Great, thank you very much, Melissa, and I agree. You know, the people involved ripple out, and who knows then where their ideas go. And supporting that, we've had another comment from Dominic Golding in the chat telling us that some students are fundamentally changed by their IQP experience, and they change the direction of their studies. And it also seems as though from alumni surveys, the IQP experience fundamentally impacts on the worldviews of most of the students that do it. So that really supports your point, Melissa. Thank you, Dominic. So we're coming to the end of our hour together. Thank you very much. I would have loved to spend longer talking about it. Thank you too for Melissa, who's added a chat about some request features, which I'll be saving for the next team if we're lucky enough to have another chance to work with WPI students. So just rounding up, I want to just reflect again on this amazing bit of work the students did, building a website from scratch that made sense of a really complicated information landscape, linking to all sorts of different organizations, somehow connected with tracking weapons and tracking the uses of weapons. It was extremely exciting for us to work with them. We're extremely proud of the output, and we're looking forward to telling more people about it and using it more regularly in our day-to-day work. So it's really time just to say goodbye, but before I do, save the link, and if you have any comments, please do get back to us. If you have any ideas, you know, a number of people in the panel have said about we could be extending it in different sorts of ways, using different data sets, using different organizations. If you have an idea for what those data sets are, what those organizations are, please do let us know. You can email the Scrap website. And Alexandra, I want to talk to you more about the ideas that you had for using the information from Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. But in the meantime, it's now time just to say a whole bunch of thank yous. A massive thank you to the students for doing it in the first place. Major thank you for our panelists who gave really interesting talks and responded to really interesting discussion. I also want to say thank you to Ashika Doshi and Zara Kapasi for being the behind the scenes people that made this all work, and to the SOAS IT team. Thank you all very much. Thank you for coming to the audience, and have a great rest of your day. Yeah, see you soon. Yeah, bye-bye.